On a quiet winter morning, a commuter train rumbled toward Manhattan on a familiar route along the Hudson River. However, a few seconds of inaction would soon turn a routine run into one of New York's worst rail accidents in decades, and the reason given was rather unusual. At around 5:54 a.m. on the 1st of December 2013, Metro North Train 8808 departed Poughkeepsie with around 115 passengers, beginning a 74-mile southbound run to Grand Central in Manhattan. The train had 3 conductors, 6 off-duty employees, and a veteran at the controls. Heading down the Hudson Line in the early morning darkness, it made several stops as it followed the eastern bank of the Hudson River. Train number 8808 consisted of 7 Bombardier Shoreliner Mark IV passenger cars, including a cab car leading at the front, while pushing from the back, a General Electric P32 AC/DM hybrid locomotive capable of running on both diesel and third rail power. The locomotive engineer was William Rockefeller, a 15-year veteran of Metro North, with 10 years as a locomotive engineer and 5 years spent in other roles within the company. For the past 2 weeks, however, he'd been assigned the early shift instead of his afternoon shifts, which he preferred, a reluctant transition requiring him to leave home at around 3:30 a.m. to start his day. Shortly before 7:19 a.m., train number 8808, after an uneventful run down the Hudson Valley, passing stations in Yonkers and entering the Bronx, continued south on the straight 4-tracked section beside the Hudson River. Hugging the shoreline, the water was on one side and the suburban streets of the Bronx on the other. However, just ahead, the track pulled hard from the river and into a sharp curve near Spuyten Duyvil Station. A 30-mile-per-hour limit on the curve meant approaching trains should have begun slowing well before it. However, train 8808, fast approaching, was traveling 82 miles per hour, almost 3 times the limit, and showing no signs of slowing. At 7:19 a.m., train 8808 reached the curve at Spuyten Duyvil, still traveling at full speed. Rockefeller applied the emergency brake, however, by then it was already too late. At almost 3 times the speed limit, his cab car tipped to the right and left the tracks, sliding toward the riverbank. The cars behind broke apart at the 4th carriage. Cars 1 to 3 rolled onto their sides, while car 4 rolled in the opposite direction. The remaining cars derailed, while the rear carriage and the locomotive at the back toppled over. Many of the windows shattered or detached as the cars scraped along the ground, and several passengers were thrown through the openings. Emergency crews reached the wreck within minutes. More than 125 firefighters and multiple EMS teams approached from Spuyten Duyvil Station, 50 meters from the crash site. Responders waited until the third rail power was confirmed to be off, then moved through the overturned carriages. They searched for the injured, stabilized those trapped, and guided others through the broken windows and side doors. Passengers who could walk were moved to a nearby school that had been set up as a family resource center. By the time the rescue phase had ended, 61 people had been injured and 4 people were dead. 3 of them had been thrown from the train during the derailment. The investigation into the accident was conducted by the National Transportation Safety Board. In the days and weeks following, investigators determined there had been no issue with the track, the train's brakes, or the signaling system, ruling out any mechanical or infrastructural failure, meaning the cause of the derailment most likely fell at the feet of the driver. After downloading the train's event recorders, investigators learned that train 8808 had approached the curve at Spuyten Duyvil at around 82 miles per hour, nearly 3 times the limit, with the brakes only applied as it entered the bend. William Rockefeller, the locomotive engineer, was asked to hand over his mobile phone so investigators could check whether he'd been using it in the moments before the accident. He was also required to undergo substance and alcohol testing and give an account of the morning. His phone records, however, showed no use prior to the crash, and his toxicology tests came back clean. Investigators were no closer to understanding the derailment. When interviewed by investigators, Rockefeller said he had felt dazed before the curve and that he had only regained full awareness moments before hitting the brake, telling them he had been sort of dazed. Furthermore, in the period following the accident, Rockefeller was diagnosed with obstructive sleep apnea, a condition marked by repeated airway obstruction during sleep, causing oxygen drops, fragmented rest, and significant fatigue. The NTSB concluded that his recent shift change, combined with the undiagnosed condition, left him vulnerable to white line fever, a dazed state where repetitive surroundings allow basic operation but impair awareness of critical cues like braking. The NTSB's final report concluded Rockefeller's loss of attention was the immediate cause of the derailment. His undiagnosed sleep apnea, combined with the sudden switch to early mornings, left him fatigued despite going to bed early. However, as with so many train accidents in the United States around the time, investigators highlighted that the lack of positive train control, a system that automatically slows or stops a train when speed limits are exceeded, or a train passes a red light, a system present in most other parts of the developed world, would have almost certainly prevented the accident. The absence of such a basic system on the Hudson line left no barrier between human error and disaster. Those familiar with my channel will know I've featured several train accidents in the United States recently, in which the absence of positive train control played a major role in the disaster. Among the reactions to this was a commuter who said she was surprised that a modern American rail system had no safeguard to stop a train from overspeeding, telling reporters, "I really thought they had that in place. This is the United States." In the months after the derailment, Metro North faced significant legal fallout. By 2020, they'd paid around $60 million in legal claims, making the crash not only their first fatal accident, but also the costliest in its history. The settlements ranged from wrongful death to injury claims and compensation for long-term medical needs arising from the derailment. Rockefeller, the train's engineer, later filed a $10 million federal lawsuit against his employer, arguing they'd failed to install a system to warn engineers when they exceeded speed limits. He pointed to a similar overspeeding incident in 2005 on the same curve, which almost resulted in a derailment, and claimed Metro North knew of the danger. However, they countersued for the same amount, citing damages caused by the derailment. Both eventually withdrew their lawsuits. In the aftermath, Rockefeller was diagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorder. He was ultimately deemed disabled and unable to return to work, and would now receive a monthly disability payment determined through the standard process for rail employees following a catastrophic incident. He was awarded a monthly pension of $3,200. The Spuyten-Duyvil train derailment was caused by a single lapse in awareness on a familiar route. A safety system existed that could have prevented it all, a system proven to save lives but had not yet been installed. By 2020, Metro North had finally completed the installation of positive train control across the Hudson and Harlem lines, meeting the extended federal deadline after years of delay. That's all for today's video. If you found value in it, I'd love it if you subscribed and joined me for the next one. To watch my coverage of the Chatsworth train collision, you can click the link on screen. And as always, thanks for watching.